Poland entered the war. Polish government had an alliance with France and Britain. Separate alliances were working together. And commitments from the French in writing that after 15 days after a German attack on Poland, the French army would launch a general offensive in the west against Germany. The British had committed to bomb German military objectives if such were bombed by the Germans in Poland. But what the Poles were not told was that in April 1939, after the British guarantee of Polish independence, the British and French staffs had agreed that if Germany attacked Poland, they would sit on their hands and wait for the Germans to attack them. They needed the time. As General Gamelin, who was the head of the French General Staff, said on September 13th, 1939, at the first meeting of the military chiefs of Britain and France, he was asked, would you help the Poles if they held out for 3 months? He said, no, we have no plans to help the Poles. Their duty is to hold out as long as possible to gain time for France. That's one thing. Another thing is that the Poles didn't know of the secret protocol to the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact. That was the non-aggression treaty signed in Moscow excuse me, on August 23rd, 1939. And in the secret protocol, you have a division of influence between the Soviet Union and Germany. The line across Poland would go right through here. This second line was modified, there's a modified line September 28th, when Stalin gave up some of the Polish land he had, which was ethnically Polish, instead, in return for control of all of Lithuania, except a small piece here and there. So the Poles didn't know this, the French did, the British did, the Americans did. How did they know? Because the first secretary in the German embassy, Hans Herwart from Bittenfeld, was an anti-Nazi, had leaked the terms to Chip Boland, who was American, I don't know exactly what post he had in the American embassy at the time. And that was reported to Washington. And Sumner Welles, number 2, Secretary of State, told the British ambassador, who cabled it to London, that it was delayed a little bit because there was a Soviet agent in the code room, the Foreign Office, who was forwarding, well, he delayed that one on orders, but before that he was forwarding all the British and French correspondence and proposals to Moscow. And there were negotiations between the French, British on the one side, the Soviet Union on the other. Well, anyway, why didn't the French and British or the Americans tell the Poles? Well, the reason was the Poles was afraid the Poles would cave in, they wouldn't fight Hitler. And so they wouldn't gain that time, France and Britain. And I've always asked myself, what would the Polish government have done if it had known, A, that it would get no help from France and Britain in the West, B, if it had known of the secret protocol? Because this is a hypothetical question. But my guess is they would have fought for a few days and then given up. As it was, they were waiting for this French and British help, and they fought for almost 5 weeks. A lot of towns were destroyed, a lot of lives lost. Well, to come back to the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact, there was a tremendous campaign, media campaign in Russia in June and July this year, attacking Poland as the country that cooperated with Hitler against the USSR. Foreign Minister Beck was conspiring with Hitler in the spring of 1939, so goes the story, to attack the USSR in tandem with Japan. Of course, that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know why they launched this silly campaign. It certainly upset Polish public opinion a great deal. I assume that it was launched to take the onus off the old Soviet Union, off Stalin for signing the pact, all in the first place. Well, now, Prime Minister Putin, Vladimir Putin, wrote a letter, an open letter to the Poles, which was published yesterday, in which he said, well, we did condemn the secret protocol. After all, the Duma, the Russian parliament, condemned the secret protocol in December of '89, and we think it's morally bad. He didn't mention the fact that his party in the Duma was trying to get the Duma to rescind its condemnation, so maybe he's changed them. Obviously, he was trying to placate the Polish public opinion. And then he said, of course, the Ribbentrop-Molotov Pact is not the beginning of the Second World War. You have to go back to Munich, the appeasement of Germany by the Western powers, that really, and the exclusion of the Soviet Union from great power politics, even to the Treaty of Versailles. Poor old Treaty of Versailles, which was blamed for Hitler, and that's absolutely nonsense in my view. What really gave Hitler great German support when his party was elected finally in '33 was the Great Depression. He was promising the Germans work. Of course he blamed the Treaty of Versailles. This is the ethnic map of 1910, German, printed in Germany in '33. The corridor starts way up on the Baltic and goes down more or less either to Graudenz or to Brownbag, Lujon's Bydgoszcz, Pendy. So what the statesmen did in Paris Peace Conference, Treaty of Versailles signed in Versailles, they had to unwind a great problem, what to do. The Poles wanted Danzig as the only port they could use. They had used before the partitions the main port of Poland, though it didn't belong to Poland really, or officially it did, but in reality it ruled itself. And then separating the Eastern Prussia from Germany. If you gave Danzig and the corridor to Germany, that would obviously be unfair to the Poles. If you gave Danzig to Germany, to Poland, and so forth, then that would be bad to the Germans. So they chose a compromise. I think in the existing situation, they did the best they could. Danzig was German-speaking. It became a free state, a free city, freie Stadt, not state. Ruled itself. And there was a League of Nations commissioner there to keep peace between the Germans and the Poles. And the corridor, as the Germans call it, Polish Pomerania, which had belonged to Poland before the partition, and was mostly Polish, was given to Poland. Well, the Germans, of course, resented it, but that was not the cause of the war. I remember reading a book recently, the memoirs of a German soldier on the Eastern Front, called Soldat, Soldier. And he said, of course we agreed with Hitler that we should get Danzig back, that we should get corridor back, and we should keep the Sudetenland, but we didn't know that he was setting out on a campaign to dominate Europe. We didn't know that he was crazy.